Thank you. Um, that was wonderful. Thank you very much. It's now my privilege to introduce John Kern, who comes from a citizen policy background. He is from the Rutten Kern Policy Group. He's practiced law for 25 years in public and private capacities in the United States and in Europe. He has offices, Rutten Kern has offices in Washington, D.C. and in Santa Fe. Among his clients, he represents New Mexico ranches and dairies, and we'll hear from them in a little bit. He also serves as the executive director of the Clean Water Partnership, a nonprofit community based group working to resolve water issues with federal, state, and local interests. Clean Water Partnership has lobbied for and secured state funding for water testing in affected communities, particularly those hosting military facilities impacted by PFAS contamination. For more, there's a website, cwp-canon.org, and you can read about Mr. Kearns and the group's efforts in New Mexico in environmental affairs. It's now a privilege to turn over the mic to John Kern.
Thank you, Professor, very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I have a few slides I'll go through. I'll speak just a little bit about the Clean Water Partnership and then speak to the issue of standards. The farming and ranching communities out here, certainly water is an issue, but the water goes to the animals that create milk, beef, and cheese and other dairy products, and also into the vegetation, the silage that animals feed on, and humans too. So our focus is a little bit different, not directly on drinking water per se, although that's crucial. But I think that your practitioners will understand that it's the complete diet of the patient that has to be taken into consideration. Let me see if I can share the screen here. Share. Okay, does that come across? Have you got that?
Yes, we see your screen. You might need to switch to display mode. Looks like I see everything.
Okay. All right. I don't know how to do that. I'm sorry. Let me go this way. Okay.
Yeah, so
this yeah, thanks. This is
you might need to scroll instead of click.
This is the geographic area of eastern New Mexico where Cannon Air Force Base is. The city of Clovis is 40,000 people, 5 miles distant. City of Portales, 20,000 people. These red dots are major dairies, 5 to 10,000 head of cattle. This is Southwest Cheese, the largest cheese plant in the country. If your patients are consuming Sargento or Domino's or Papa John's pizza, that cheese is coming from this plant. And I will try to do this. I'm sorry for my clumsy fingers. This is a cross section of the Cannon Air Force Base. It's about 2 miles across. And in this region, over the last 50 years, there's been almost 20 million gallons of PFAS firefighting foam products that have been dumped into the earth. They've not been managed properly, and they've made their way down about 400 feet into the Ogallala Aquifer, which, as many know, starts in Nebraska and ends up in Texas, and it sweeps right underneath this airbase at Cannon. It's caused the PFAS contamination to spread about 5 to 6 miles. I'm circling an area where a well has picked up PFAS from the base, and it's about 6 miles distance from Cannon Air Force Base where the firefighting training activities went. Mr. Scott, who will speak momentarily, and I'll talk about his dairy, is right where this blue concentration is, where test results have come in over 10,000 parts per trillion. This is the Scott dairy called Highland Dairy. He's measured over 11,000 parts per trillion right on the dairy where the feedlots are and the silage is grown to feed the cows. What Mr. Scott witnessed was a drop in lactation productivity of his herd. Starting in 2009, he had been in keeping with the kind of the top tier of dairies in New Mexico, but his production started to go down dramatically, down to 82% of the other dairies surrounding him. So the cow's lactation was compromised, and we believe compromised by the presence of PFAS in the bloodstream and the milk of these Holstein cows. In 2014, there was an economic boom in dairy, and he replaced quite a lot of his herd with clean cattle. Number goes up and then it dropped back down. So when production was stopped by the federal government in 2018 at this dairy, he was only producing about 50 pounds per day of milk per cow, and the standard locally is about 70 pounds per day of milk. Lactation as a matter of medical care is something that is yet to be studied, and Alan has picked up on this and cited this as an interesting issue, an area of study where we have quite a lot of data on dairy cow milk production, and how that correlates to human, we'll have to see. In 2019, cows started dying out on the Highland dairy. By 2020, they had lost about 600 head of cattle, 14% of the herd. And this picture was taken last week. This is about 1,250 cows dead on this dairy. And they're not dying per se from, we don't know why they're dying other than aging out. There have been many instances of dwarf calves. So when we talk about birth defects in PFAS adulterated mothers, we've certainly seen, or Art Scop has seen his share of those. But the cows are prohibited from going onto the market, as he will discuss, and they're stranded on the dairy and they're dying on the dairy. Now, this is a little bit of a complex chart, but I wanted to give you, this is the best data we have. The red line at the base of this, it's measured in parts per trillion, and this shows what an acceptable level of milk production or tolerance of PFAS in milk, not water, but milk, is according to the FDA, and that's 400 parts per trillion. As you know, water is at 70 parts per trillion. And the green dashed line is kind of a regression analysis about how the numbers are tapering off very slowly. They are negative, and the incidence is slightly negative, but not in a dramatic way. This cluster of data points comes from a study performed by the Food Safety Inspection Service, and it was just conducted over about a 5 to 6 month period. And they developed a slope, if you will, which was very aggressive. So they had cows could be rehabilitated, that their beef might come back onto the market and be marketable based on this curve right here, which is rather steep in its decline. In reality, it's more like this. We see, if you have a few more data points, you see a much more gradual regression in the incidence of PFAS. Still, it's up around, on an average aggregate basis, 5 to 10 times what an allowable limit would be. The last score we have from December was about 1,000 parts per trillion in the milk from these cows. So it's not working. The lives of the cows are 72 months, about 6 years, the normal lifespan. So the cows have really no economic value. The milk that they're producing has been taken off the market at this dairy. The beef has been taken off the market, but it's something that we've struggled with, and so we fought with the Defense Department to try, which coming from Cannon Air Force Base, this AFFF foam causing this. So we have secured some federal legislation that through the New Mexico delegation that compels the Defense Department to clean agricultural water. But the DoD has said, well, until there's a standard developed by the FDA, the USDA, or another agency responsible for monitoring food safety, we're doing nothing. And so they have just done nothing over the past 2 years that we've had this bill, this piece of legislation in place as a standard. And so we're fighting for standards, not only EPA to lock up its lifetime health advisory into a firm number, but also in these other agencies to address the other food products so that we can address this issue on a more broad scale. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that very helpful